My name's Anthony Alio. I'm the project manager for this project, the North Bethany Bicycle and Pedestrian Corridor Study. For those of you who were able to attend the May 8th public workshop, we greatly appreciate that. And this is the follow-up Q&A session corresponding with that workshop. So as we start every slide or every presentation, we want to go over our mission statement, excellence in transportation, every trip, every mode, every dollar, every one, with the emphasis on safety. And moving forward, we want to take a look at our up-to-date safety statistics for 2023. Seems that we are down overall by 26%. However, since we are dealing with a bicycle and pedestrian study, pedestrians were at the same rate we were last year. And bicyclists, we actually have one more fatality than this time last year. So we want to take a good look at those crashes and try to improve those statistics every year, especially the non-motorized traveling public.
Thank you, Anthony. So tonight, again, we're not going to go through the same presentation we delivered at the workshop, which is also posted online, but I do want to give you a high-level overview of what is available online, just to make sure that everyone is aware of what they can find there, and as before we move into the question and answer session. But before I do that, just wanted to let you know who we have in the virtual room with us this evening. And I'm not gonna, I guess I could ask them each to come off mute just to say hello. So we'll start at the top of the list. Pam?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pam Steinbach, and I'm the Director of Planning for DelDOT. So just want to thank everyone on the call from our team. Thank you for the support and for everybody in the community for joining us for this Q&A. And just as an aside, it is extremely important. We love this interactive question and answer, but I would impress upon everybody to please fill out the online survey as well, just so we can memorialize all of the comments as well as who you are and your contact information. So thank you again, and I will turn it over. You did get introduced by Anthony, so I will turn it over to Pete Haig.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Haig. I'm DelDOT's Chief of Traffic Engineering.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Buckley. I work for Whitman Reichardt & Associates. I'm on the traffic engineering team.
And lastly, my name is Leah Xanda. I'm also with WRA, and I am a planner and working with Anthony to manage this effort. So for those of you who have not visited the project website, I do encourage you to do so. In addition to the survey, which Pam mentioned, there's also a lot of other really great information up there. You can access it by navigating to that link you see on your screen or scanning that QR code with your phone. On that site, you'll see a series of tabs across the top. If you're on your phone, you kind of have to thumb side to side to get to each of those tabs. If you're on a desktop, it comes through roughly similar to what you see on the screen there. That second tab over, you will see where it says May Workshop Materials. If you click on that, you'll see a presentation, YouTube presentation of yours truly speaking to this project with a little bit more background information than we're going to get into tonight, along with a series of boards that contain a lot of information. We did have the chance to review them in person at the public workshop, but for those of you who were not at our workshop, you may have taken a look at those and been confused by something or have some questions you want to follow up with us. So if you do have questions about anything you read online, please, tonight is a great opportunity to ask those of the team here. Basically, we have the same folks on the call tonight that were in the room in person a couple weeks ago. The next tab over is the public survey tab, and that is what Pam mentioned at the beginning during her introduction. So that will remain open through June 7th. So if after tonight you want to go back in and provide an open-ended comment in light of what you hear tonight, you're welcome to do so. The form should let you do so. We have heard from quite a number of your neighbors so far. And if that survey feels a little too limiting and you have some other input for us, you also can feel free to email broader comment via this email address, northbethanycorridor@publicinput.com, and that will all get submitted via the same portal. So with that, I'd like to direct you all, you should all see a Q&A icon on your screen somewhere. You should be able to select that and type a question in to us. So at this point, we're going to open up the question period. I see one waiting in there that we'll jump to. We're going to do our best to respond to questions that we receive in the order they come in, but we will be consolidating questions if we receive similar questions. So bear with us. Also, again, as Pam said, if you have comments, we really would like you to encourage you to submit them via the survey or project email, just because so we have it in writing with your name and a way to get back in touch with you. Basically, what we're seeing on our end with Zoom is just, in some cases, a first name or even the device name that you're on. So let's see. Moving on to our questions. So very first, Seth has asked us to address the timeline for the project. So that is one that I can take. You will see on the right side of the public website a timeline. So kind of along the side of the screen, under project contact information over here, you will see a timeline for this project. So right now we have that public commented period open through the 7th. And after that closes, it seems like we're going to have a lot of information to go through. So we're going to be taking a look at what we heard from all of you and determining our next steps for both the short-term improvements, and that's the speed limit, potential speed limit changes, and the crossing improvements, as well as the mid and long-term improvements, and that would be broader changes to the corridor as a whole. So we will be using the summer to kind of establish what our next steps are for all of that and consolidating that information and making some decisions that we will come back to you with in the fall with some more information, with a goal of having a follow-up public meeting with a little bit more detail about what our proposed improvements are for mid and long-term improvements. And ideally, we will be wrapping up a final report that documents everything we find by late winter, early spring of 2025. So that's the timeline we are on for the reporting. I will hand it over to Peter to speak to the timeline for our short-term improvements. So that's that speed limit I mentioned, as well as the crossing improvements. And those are on a slightly different schedule, since those are kind of interim measures that we're taking in response to feedback we heard from you back in 2022 and 23. Peter?
So from a speed limit change, again, we're here as well as the physical workshop that we held, mainly get public feedback until the beginning of June. Once the comments and the survey information is reviewed, if the movement towards the implementation of the reduction in speed limit occurs, that typically can take upwards of 12 weeks for implementation, for changing out the various signs, and deploying the various other things with regards to the improvements. From a rectangular rapid flashing beacon standpoint, we're hoping to hand that project off later this summer. But due to various workout restrictions, again, due to the resort areas, just with the pure volume, we're limited when we can start the physical or actually take lanes in order to complete the construction. So temporarily put lane closures out there, but the goal is by the summer of 2025 that rectangular rapid flashing beacon at the one location, the Indian Harbor or the Fresh Pond North crossing and Route 1 would be implemented by next summer.
Thank you, Peter. Next question. As a resident of North Bethany, I would be okay with actual enforcement of whatever the speed limit is, whether that's 45 or 55. There is no enforcement now. Would also be okay with a traffic light at the entrance to Fresh Pond Trail, which would cut the current length of the drag strip in half. Please comment on this approach if possible. Matt, I'm going to ask you to take that one if you could.
Thanks, Leah. It really comes down to the volume of pedestrians and bicyclists wanting to cross at North Fresh Pond. That's really the only location. I don't know if you want to share the map that shows the crossing data, but the general rule of thumb to warrant a full red, yellow, green steady traffic signal is about 100 pedestrians and cyclists per hour. North Fresh Pond has about half of that. And then Indian Harbor Villa, as well as the South Fresh Pond crossing, they're far, far, far below those numbers. So it really comes down to, we trust the data that says that if a traffic signal is not warranted, a full red, yellow, green traffic signal, there's a lot of safety implications associated with that. So seeing as that the volumes out here, even at the highest hour in the summer, are only about half of that threshold, that countermeasure of a steady traffic light is kind of off the table. When we look at pedestrian hybrid beacons or hawks, we did a statewide compliance study on that, and it basically said that not only are pedestrians and cyclists confused by that type of treatment, like we have a little bit farther north on Route 1, but also motorists. So that countermeasure is more or less off the table. So that kind of led us to the RFB, which we've installed almost 60 of those statewide, and the compliance there is very favorable on having vehicles yield to pedestrians and cyclists once they enter the crosswalk.
Thank you, Matt. We have a few additional questions on speed. So one from Sarah, how much does it cost to reduce the speed limit? And how difficult is it to reduce the speed limit from an infrastructure standpoint? Would DelDOT consider a lower speed limit on a seasonal basis? Peter?
So from a cost standpoint, it's a few $1,000s. And it's really just a pure number of signs that are along the Route 1 corridor that would need to be or changed in order to change the speed limit. Again, we look at that that few $1,000 price range is really a low cost countermeasure. From a infrastructure standpoint perspective with reducing the speeds, that's part of the midterm recommendations of actually trying to provide some narrowing of the lanes with some pavement marking improvements through various programs when the surface of Route 1 is repaved. So that again, that narrowing application again tends to help assist lowering those speed limits to more of the posted condition that we're trying to propose here. Then the last question with regards to the seasonal change. So historically, we had a seasonal speed limit. I believe it was in the 90s when it was implemented. It presents operational challenges, as well as kind of the road user perception on, again, when they're traveling into that environment, especially with the various pedestrian and bicycle usage, not just in season, but off season. Again, the safety aspect is to provide a uniform speed limit or a speed limit that is the same and consistent, and not changing based on the season. But it has been done in the past, but unfortunately it was pivoted away from it due to various challenges, as well as the safety side of it.
Thank you, Peter. And a slightly related follow-up question. Firstly, thanks to the team for how thoroughly we've studied the issue. Thank you for your thanks. And with Memorial Day approaching, the timing of this meeting is great. Can you explain why you can't simply lower the speed limit immediately? All the other options require construction and time, but it seems like the speed limit, especially in light of your answer you just gave, Peter, could be done pretty quickly.
Correct. So again, we're here. The first step is really the public feedback side of it. Again, we don't want to propose something or pursue something that isn't really accepted. And so again, once we have all the survey information, the comments, as well as the various feedback that we received at the physical public workshop a few weeks ago, we'll be able to take that information to then determine a path forward. But again, that change, if we move forward with it, it's mainly just it's changing out existing speed limit signs to reflect the new change of the 50-mile-an-hour condition, the 45-mile-an-hour condition, especially in the North Bethany area south of the bridge.
And one follow-on question, is there any possibility that will happen in 2024?
There is a possibility. Again, if we're again, that 12-week time period, again, a lot of these signs are pretty standard and we have in stock. And so it's just a matter of getting it out. Once it's agreed upon, there's some various things that we can do as like early action items to kind of cut the 12-week time period out down. But it should be, if it's forged ahead, it could possibly be done this calendar year.
Thank you. I'm going to skip ahead to a couple of other questions on speed while we're kind of on that topic. David asks, when we're considering changes to the speed limit, responding to trends and fatalities and similar data makes sense, but does planning also incorporate growth of road crossings, growth in population density, et cetera? We are much more crowded now than even 2 to 3 years ago, and it would be good to stay ahead of the pedestrian and bicyclist injury data.
So that's a great comment. So that's what falls into that context sensitivity component that we utilize with speed limits. So typically with setting speed limits based on from a regulation standpoint, we're trying to stay within 5 miles an hour of the 85th percentile. With regards to that posting, the 85th percentile on the very section of Route 1 is really at 64 miles an hour. But when you start layering in the crash data, the geometrics, the crossing information, the connectivity that exists, especially with the trails, that plays into really the decision-making process, and in this case, the proposed speed limits for this section of Route 1.
And I think we've spoken to this one pretty extensively, and the nuanced answers, Peter, you've been giving are really helpful. But Jim noted that at last year's public meeting, DelDOT was a little bit more pessimistic about the possibility of reducing the speed limit, and is asking what happened to change our position. And I think really hearing there's been a lot of study and a lot of feedback done since then to kind of move the needle. But Peter, do you have anything to add there as to why our thinking has changed in evaluating this corridor?
So again, a variety of things come to mind. So proactive safety is one thing. That's with the safe system approach, which is methodology preached by our partners at Federal Highway Administration. Again, it looks at various components. And so I think this is just a different way of looking at the various information to proactively move forward with a safer environment on the corridor.
Thank you. Another speed one. So the option on the survey was a reduction from 55 to 45. Is it possible to add 35 miles per hour as an option?
Presently, we are not proposing anything below the 45. Again, I mentioned the 85th percentile speed of already being 64 miles an hour. So anything really lower than that, you're just increasing that differential of speeds for that corridor. And that's where really I'll say probably the midterm solutions and the proposals and improvements for narrowing lanes to try to induce and improve and get motors to drive comfortably at that posted condition or the proposed new condition.
Thank you. And a related question, and you've been speaking to this, but it kind of flips the question on its head, which is why would you not reduce the speed limit? Are there any reasons not to do it? And I think you kind of spoke to that with that 85th percentile speed, which is that folks right now are driving pretty quickly along the corridor. But are there any other reasons we would shy away from doing a speed reduction?
Well, public input is another factor in it. So again, as several of us has mentioned, submitting your opinion through the various QR codes, websites before June 7th, you know, whether it's in favor, whether it's you don't like it, that's what we want to hear, so that a final decision can be made.
All right, we're gonna give Peter a little break. Been talking a lot. We have some questions about crossings. So with the crosswalks in place, and I think the assumption is that the proposed RRFB crossings are installed. So we're envisioning those are in place. Will it be required for pedestrians to cross there, or can pedestrians cross anywhere? Matt?
I mean, I think the long-term vision for the corridor is that we'd have designated marking spots with RFBs or other signs and markings, and then longer term we would look at like some of the display boards show is having some sort of median barrier that would not only help prevent head-on collisions from motor vehicle traffic crossing over the median, but it would also kind of corral and cattle shoot pedestrians to cross at designated spots. But that's a much longer term vision. It's kind of a pilot project that we're doing a little bit farther north up in the Dewey area. You can see where there's the nautical rope and wood median barrier that helps certainly limit the frequency of mid-block pedestrians crossing at locations that aren't marked with a crosswalk.
Thank you, Matt. We have a question about a specific location. So what is being done about the treacherous conditions for cyclists and walkers on the last third of a mile between North Beach Road and Route 1 on Fred Hudson? It's great that the bike path was extended from McCoy's Way, but that last third of a mile is dangerous, and this is on Fred Hudson Road. Obviously, our project tonight is on Route 1, but given that you're here and obviously Fred Hudson's adjacent, we're going to speak to it. Especially noting where the shoulder disappears going over the bridge. What can be done about the speed limit here as well as traffic calming? Anthony, do you want to take a try at this? I know you're working on that project on Fred Hudson Road.
As far as Fred Hudson goes, further east near the bridge, we don't have anything planned, and it's because of the bridge and the wetlands. If the bridge were ever to get rehab or furbished or rebuilt, we'd certainly be happy to recommend improvements to widen the bridge and make a connected bike facility to Route 1. Other than that, we don't have anything planned. It's very difficult to put something there because those are tidal wetlands and there's a lot of federal regulations that help prohibit us from doing much. But if the bridge were to get widened, then we would have I guess a leg forward in pursuing that. As far as the speed limit goes, I would refer to our traffic engineers.
So I have not heard of a request on Fred Hudson Road. Doesn't mean that we can't investigate it further. I would highly suggest submitting that question and input formally. That'll then kick off from a study standpoint, our traffic studies group to further investigate to see if the speed limit could be evaluated and changed along the Fred Hudson Road corridor.
Thank you both. Question around enforcement. Obviously, we're waiting for some of these countermeasures to be implemented. Is it possible to have more of a police presence? Peter, could you speak a little bit about the department's relationship with our enforcement partners?
Sure. So this area is enforced by Delaware State Police. We interact with them routinely. They're part of our core committee for the development of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which has the goal and objectives to eliminate fatals and serious injury crashes on a roadway. So we are constantly in communication with them with regards to various topics. Speeding is a primary area that we focus in on statewide. We could certainly talk to them with regards to this corridor, and we have had conversations previously. But I do encourage individuals, if they do have requests for enforcement along the corridor, to contact the local troop non-emergency phone number, because things are logged on their end, and it can then help with just various requests as well. So but the department could certainly reach out to them as well.
Thank you. I'm going to read out some other comments in regards to the enforcement, but I think we may have to follow up with our colleagues. Someone asks whether there were any police checkpoints along Route 1 in North Bethany this weekend during Hot Rod weekend in Ocean City. Apparently, there were countless cars traveling in excess of 100 miles per hour. Same thing with biker weekend. That's definitely Peter, I don't know if you have any details there. I saw you come off mute.
I do not. Again, any type of checkpoints and enforcement initiatives would have to be discussed with Delaware State Police.
Thank you. And I know via your elected officials too can be a great way to get engaged with state police in the area. Another comment regarding speed enforcement, noting that if it's purely electronic or photo enforced, actually pulling over a violator is almost impossible, as the shoulder is the pedestrian and bike lane. So without the level of speed limit enforcement we see in Dewey and Bethany, that the limit we post is arguably ineffective. I'm pretty sure they are still able to pull over, agreed that people walking and biking can travel in shoulders throughout the state. So that is always a concern, and clearing the shoulder before pulling into it is an obligation of anyone operating a vehicle, most certainly a state trooper. Let's see. Moving down, a couple questions about crossings. Todd notes RFBs are used throughout Delaware and asks what the average speed of those is and whether there are any existing RFBs at 45 miles per hour.
I'll take that one, Leah.
Sounds good.
I off the top of my head, I don't know what the average speed is for the installations, but certainly the RFBs to the south in Bethany Beach proper and South Bethany and Middlesex, they're in the 35 mile an hour posted range. To the north of Dewey in the Forgotten Mile, that's in the 40 mile an hour speed limit range. I guess I'm trying to find the actual written question here as a little cheat sheet, but you might have dismissed it. There are several posted 45 mile an hour throughout the state. The closest to North Bethany is up on the Georgetown Lewis Trail, Sweetbriar Road, and there we have compliance in the 90% range. There was already high compliance to start with, but there's a 45 mile an hour roadway with an RFB. Ironically, the first RFB installation in the state was up in kind of mountain biking territory on Polydrum Hill Road. That was a 50 mile an hour posted road. And there the improvement was about 30 to 35% in terms of compliance. It went from nearly no one stopping, or maybe 1 out of every 10, to about 1 out of every 3.
Thanks, Matt.
I think that answered the bulk of the question.
Yeah, and a related question, noting Tom notes he believes federal guidance recommends against RFBs with roads above 40 miles per hour. Why would you recommend something not in line with that federal guidance?
So I think we just need to clear the air here with everybody. Is that if you Google RFBs, it's going to take you back on a lot of research that started in like 2007, 2009 timeframe, and it led to what the feds called an interim approval for the use of RFBs in around 2009. At that time, DelDOT started looking at a statewide implementation program. It's kind of kicked off in the 2012 through 2015 timeframe. Fast forward to about Christmas of 2023, there's now an 11th edition of the MUTCD. Once again, that's M as in Mary, UTCD. If you all want to Google that and read what is in the federal options and standards and guidelines for RFBs, this kind of magical 40-mile-an-hour speed limit debate and guidance there's nothing in the current traffic Bible. Not to say that those previous research projects and everything else didn't point people in the right direction, but the latest and greatest in terms of what's out there from the feds, it is silent on speed limits. It's silent on pedestrian and bicycle volumes to cross the road. So I welcome you to Google the 11th edition of the MUTCD.
Thank you, Matt. Let's see here. I think a question that either Matt or Peter may be able to address, which is asking about other roads in the state that have higher speeds, specifically noting 55 miles per hour with bike lanes in a residential area. So that's a pretty broad question, and I think there's quite a few of them given the department's policy to stripe bike lanes and shoulders now. But Matt, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about, I mean, the kind of the unenforced part of that statement is a little bit kind of subjective. There's a lot of roadways where people drive way too fast, and unfortunately, the resources of our safety partners on the police department side are somewhat limited. So there are locations up and down the state where they have relatively high pedestrian and bicycle crossing, and it's a 50 or 45 mile an hour posted road, and the prevailing speed is right up around 55 miles an hour or even higher. So it's a statewide problem. But when you look at the numbers that are in the North Bethany area in terms of recreational pedestrians and cyclists using the shoulders, those numbers are extremely high. It's captured our attention, and that's why we're giving it our best effort in continually meeting with you all and trying to kind of take a stepwise approach for driving down speeds with a new posted speed limit, hopefully, as well as enhancing the known crossing locations such as North Fresh Pond.
Thank you, Matt. All right, we do have someone on the chat asking about the proposal to lower the speed limit, and I do just want to direct you when you are able to the project website. Once you navigate there, you will see a board entitled Proposed Speed Limit Changes. It's number 6 in a series of 12 boards. So you can take a look at that. It very clearly notes the current and previous current speed limit and the proposed change. So you'll see it starts up here at the southern end of Dewey Beach with a proposal of 35 miles per hour up to 50 miles per hour, kind of through the Indian River Inlet Bridge and coming down off the bridge towards North Bethany, and then 45 miles per hour in North Bethany proper. You may ask, why are we looking at that whole corridor when this project is merely looking at the North Bethany area in particular? Peter, do you want to take a stab at why we are proposing changes pretty much between Dewey and Bethany Beach instead of just the subject area for our current study?
So this is where, again, we look at things from a holistic standpoint. We know that there's been historical discussions and concerns in that South Bethany areas as you leave town. So we wanted to incorporate some of those concerns, as well as knowing the various I guess movements as you get closer to the IRIB, the bridge, with the change, but then also too in the North Bethany area, we know again the access points, the various usage, again that context sensitivity component of the evaluation is where a higher percentage of users are focused in. So that's where we then drop the speed limit in again. So again, we took a larger holistic approach towards the area to try to come up with a solution or a proposed solution, which is what Leah's showing on the screen.
Thank you. And while I have you, Mark is asking why we don't just put in some speed cameras to address the speed limit, speeding issue currently.
Sure. So June of last year, the department through legislation was able to now pursue automated electronic speed enforcement, or the usage can be pursued throughout the state. However, the legislation only allows it to be pursued in work zones, so DEL work zones, or municipalities, or what are known as residence districts in that are police jurisdiction of with Newcastle County. So areas that are have police jurisdiction of Delaware State Police that are not within a work zone are not eligible based on the legislation. So in order to pursue electronic speed cameras, that legislation would have to be updated accordingly. So we have on our strategic highway safety plan website under the speeding emphasis area is our electronic speed safety program. It gives you a variety of information about the legislation, the regulation, some frequently asked questions associated with the program, how it's going to be rolled out and implemented and pursued by municipalities or the county in the future. So definitely recommend going to that website for more details.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. I have a couple questions about the mid and longer term improvements. Basically looking at broader corridor wide improvements. So I'm going to pull up our boards that show what we were talking about with that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview. So you'll see up here, this top drawing shows the existing conditions out on the corridor. And our midterm improvements really take that existing pavement envelope. You can see it does not change between all of these options, and basically proposes a couple of pretty straightforward things. First, you'll see that we are proposing narrowing the inside shoulder. So that's the kind of extra space between the grass median and the travel lane to 2 feet, taking those travel lanes down a foot to make those more narrow, and then proposing using creating more of a buffer space between that outside travel lane and where people are walking and biking. So 1A is merely pavement markings. So that could just be accomplished with paint. And our other alternatives here, B and C, actually consider having a separate guardrail or rigid barrier in that space that would provide a physical separation from traffic. Now, the reason we're calling these midterm is because since we are using the existing pavement envelope, something similar to this could be accomplished during the next time the roadway is repaved. So obviously the most affordable option of those would just be paint only. But with some additional funding, there could be a potential for a guardrail. So, the question we have here is, what are the limitations to skip the midterm measurements and go straight to the long term? Now, looking at those long-term improvements, again, you see our existing pavement envelope at the top here, and you'll see we are creating separate shared use paths, but in order to do so, we kind of have to cut into our center median to create the space to have our buffers and make those improvements. So again, here we have two alternatives. One has just a kind of wider grass buffer with a shared use path, and the other has a more narrow grass buffer with a guardrail and that physical separation and a shared use path. Now, because we are going outside the existing pavement, that is going to be a much larger project. It's essentially a full roadway reconstruction. It would be a much longer term project that would require very extensive funding. And I am going to ask Pam to chime in here on, we have a couple questions in the chat about what would kind of the timeline look like for implementing either the mid or long-term improvements.
Yeah.
Pam?
Sure, sure. So, as I'm sure everybody is aware, that the short term is most of the time less expensive, easier to implement. The midterm maybe a bit, more in that, for 3 to 5 yearish time frame, and then longer term more than that. But what we're doing now, doing this formalized planning study with the public workshops, with the input, with ultimately is going to be a finalized plan. And with a finalized plan that has gone through alternatives, looking at constraints, looking at what the cost estimates would be, the environmental implications, then with formalized alternatives, we can then look to possibly include projects into the proposed projects to be put forth and prioritized in our capital transportation programs. So what happens is that either NPOs or municipalities or and such, they recommend things up to the, right now there is no metropolitan planning organization in this part of the beach. So what the municipality would do is that after the plan has been formalized, then the municipality or the town or the residents can send that up during our call for projects to the county, and then they will have a prioritized list of projects that will be from this area. It can be from Lewis, Georgetown, like all throughout the county. And then the county looks at all of those projects, then they bring forth to DelDOT a list of projects that are important to the actual county. And that can be funneled or potentially funded in a few ways. First of them being as part of our bike ped pool of projects. Now that program only gets a certain amount of funding associated with that. Most likely this longer term project would be much more expensive than how much the bike ped pool has every year. So most likely the project would go into our larger line item capital transportation plan. And then those list of projects get prioritized with all of the rest in the state. And then we rank them. We have public workshops to go over all of the potential projects, and then the Council on Transportation, who is appointed by the OGov's office, they weigh in on on proposed projects to be included into the CTP. So that generally is the process. I know you all got a 5-minute, learning on how an idea becomes a project, but that essentially is, and once a project is in our capital transportation plan and then eventually gets funded, then it can be, and then it can go into the preliminary engineering process and then have right away acquired the construction cost estimates and such. So that's the normal life cycle of a planning project going, through all of the steps with the public process along the way to actually get built. So the other option with that is being able to apply for a grant from the feds. So there are a ton of grant programs out there, a lot of them being safety and bike and ped oriented. So the great thing about having these longer term ideas and projects in a plan, once our process is done, in a plan that's been ported, then we can apply for grants for those potential projects. And if we are awarded a grant, we could possibly fast track that project to be funded earlier. I know that's probably not answers that anybody wants to know, but anybody wants to hear on how long it does take to get a longer term project funded. So like Anthony and Leah and Pete and Matt had said, there are these shorter term and medium term solutions that can be done earlier, but the longer term ones unfortunately have this life cycle that does take a while to be implemented. And my
Yeah.
apologies for taking so long to explain that.
No,
But
Pam, thank you. That was a really great walkthrough of kind of this process. And I will say, for those of you who are curious, there's a decent amount of information on DelDOT's website about the capital transportation plan process, and you can see what's in the budget right now. I hate to ask you to put a number to it, but
Sure.
for a project of this scale, if we were to say go today,
Yeah, sure.
and the next time the capital budget is updated, long-term improvements were in there.
Yeah.
Approximately how many years would you venture to guess it would take if it makes it into the budget once it's compared with and competes with all the other projects in
course.
Sussex County?
Sure. So realistically, we are in the process of the Council on Transportation approved the FY 26. No, wait, hold on for a second. I've been on so many iterations of the my apologies. The FY 25 to 30, that CTP bundle has gone through the Council on Transportation. It got sent to OGov, and then that will be fingers crossed approved by the end of June, and then the feds have to approve it on their end, and that is done normally in by the end of September, because that's the end of their fiscal. Now, we are on a biennial CTP process, so so the next round of projects, so it's too late for the FY 25. That public process has been done and completed. So the next one is FY 27 to 32. And that process, so once this plan is done, there's a long-term solution that gets put through the prioritization process. DelDOT has that on the list. We go through the public workshops, it gets ranked, and it rises up to the top. So we're going to include, excuse me, we're going to include that as part of that next round of CTP. Normally, the projects get funded for preliminary engineering in the last 2 years of the 6-year plan. So realistically, the preliminary engineering might get funded in FY 30-ish, 31. And then for a project of this size, you're looking at an engineering and right-of-way process of 2 years, and then it would go to construction. So realistically, it would be 32 F32, somewhere around there, but it could be longer. So unfortunately, with the size, so this type of project being 4 miles long, and like Leah said, a complete reconstruction of the whole section, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. So that's why that's why that timing would be so far out. Sorry in advance if anybody's not a big fan of that. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Just the way it
Pam.
is.
Yeah, and as we look at projects that are getting constructed throughout the county, and if you look at the history of them, you'll see they've been in that capital transportation program for quite some time. So let's see. It's a question more generally about, once the plan's agreed upon, what's the process of approval? Generally, what we do for these is a series, this public engagement process is going to continue throughout the plan development. So again, we will be back out and talking to you all in person this fall with kind of some refined recommendations and ideas. And then we will be documenting those preferred alternatives in our plan. And because this area is not incorporated, generally the county would be involved in kind of taking a look and reviewing it, because as Pam said, it's their buy-in that is going to allow the project to be submitted for consideration to fund long-term. So, we will be kind of coordinating with the county and you all, and once the draft plan is ready, it will be posted for public comment and feedback. And then pretty much once it's done and we incorporate any necessary edits we received from our stakeholders and you all, it'll be posted and considered adopted. Now, I can tell you there's plenty of plans up and down the state that have lots of great ideas, and it definitely is not given that every great idea in a plan is going to get designed and built. So again, that's part of the balancing process DelDOT has to do with communities across the state, and understanding, what's the priority for countywide investment. So again, encourage you to continue to make your priority and opinion in this area known not only to us via the survey, but of course your local elected officials, since you do not live within an incorporated area.
Yep, Leah, and yeah, thank you so much for that. And just to tack on to that, you're for sure not unique in implementing the short and midterm recommendations first. So there are, as Leah said, there are a lot of corridors throughout the state that have big, concerns and transportation challenges. And we are generally in the incremental way of things. So we try the fastest, least expensive things first that we can implement. So that's why the potential for the speed and the RRFBs were going to be implemented. We are going to we're going to if and when those things do get implemented, we will be doing analysis, doing more fed data to make sure and see that those things are working. So that's the part of it. We know that it's a long process, but doing this incrementally, we actually do it a lot throughout the state. So it's just those big cost projects do take a long time to be implemented.
Thank you, Pam. We do have a couple more questions in the chat about, firstly, kind of how RFPs work and what compliance means. So Matt, I think these are for you. So one of our questions is what does compliance mean? Does that mean that they're driving through the RFP crosswalk while pedestrians may be crossing? And as a follow-up to that, what is the law for drivers who do see those blinking yellow lights? And do they have to stop or proceed with caution?
So Delaware is a yield to pedestrians within a crosswalk state. It's not stop, but the compliance measurement or kind of in-field study that we utilize, that we've done for the past 10 years is like in this location, you would have a marked crosswalk. It would be on the shoulder. They would be plain clothed. They would have a spotter. He or she would be about 300 to 500 feet up the road to provide a verbal command, whether or not it's safe or not if a vehicle's coming. But you literally just wait on the side of the road with 1 foot inside the crosswalk. You're not in the middle of the road. You're not in the middle of the crosswalk. There's no safe way to study whether or not somebody's going to stop for you there. So you can't jeopardize the safety of a person that's actually in the crosswalk. So we're measuring whether or not as a person has 1 foot or 1 toe in a marked crosswalk. And if that's out on a shoulder of a roadway like this, it's on the shoulder. And whether or not a motorist in that kind of pack of traffic will yield, will come to a stop and yield for that pedestrian to cross. So what was the other question, Leah?
What is the law for, so you spoke to this already. It was more about like, what are drivers legally obligated to do when they see those blinking yellow lights? More detail there is some concern with sight lines being impacted by other vehicles and confusion of drivers and pedestrians alike. I think we heard a lot of this at the workshop too, which is what if the rightmost car is yielding and then the leftmost car can't tell that there is a pedestrian in that crosswalk?
So the design that we're proposing for all 3 of the kind of upcoming RFP projects, they're all overhead. So we'll have a steel arm that reaches out to the center of the 2 lanes, 1 on each side, northbound and southbound. So you'll have flashing lights overhead. You'll also have them in the median, flashing side by side, and then we'll have them about 400 or 500 feet in advance, indicating that there's a crosswalk ahead and it'll be lit up and flashing when a pedestrian or cyclist press the button. So we do recognize that sight lines can be blocked at times. We do recognize that it's a higher speed facility with multiple lanes. So we're throwing everything at it here in terms of all the statewide installations that we've done. We have a handful of overhead locations that we've tested compliance on. We have 1 or 2 with those ahead in advance RFPs as well. So we're trying to capture everybody's attention as best we can with as much light as we can.
Thank you, Matt. A couple questions. One about whether those longer term alternatives, and I think these might, despite being about the long-term alternatives, be a question for traffic. One is whether there's any consideration of planting trees in the median to help further reduce the sound of traffic. And Peter, could you speak a little bit about how trees are viewed from a traffic safety perspective?
Sure. So when you're thinking about devices or various applications like vegetation in a median or along the roadside. You're trying to balance the run off the road condition and how those obstacles in those areas will respond to if there is a crash or a vehicle that does veer off the roadway or into or cross the median. So that's where certain uh types of vegetation or the pursuit of different applications are really ironed out during the design process in further detail that looks at some of those treatments or some of those scenarios in further.
Thank you. That is part of why we are looking at some of those native plantings. I'm sure many of you have traveled Route 1 and seen some of the more meadow native plants in the median, which obviously do not have that sound diminishing characteristic, but do provide some aesthetic benefit as well as supporting all the native species that rely on those things for pollination. Looking at another question about long-term improvements, would we consider burying the utility lines? So Pam spoke a little bit about the cost of a project like this when we're doing so many miles, and burying utility lines really even further increases that cost to the point of it, I venture to say, being cost prohibitive. In addition to the fact this area, as you all know, is very low lying and close to the water table, which gives us some extra concerns with going below grade with utilities. But Pam, did you have anything else to add?
Sure. Yeah, so normally in areas where we have underground them, and this is going back from my DOTS days, my transportation solutions days, but I do believe, and we can check on this again, but I do believe we would have to, obviously we would have to coordinate with the utility companies, but if it wasn't their intention to underground, normally this happens in municipalities, and that the town or the city normally has to front the bill for the undergrounding, from what my previous experience has been, but we can check on that. That would be great. Whoever asked that would be great if you did put that in the public comment form so that we can follow up with our utility section. But I'm almost positive that is the path in any type of undergrounding of aerial lines.
Thank you, Pam. Yes, and just for all of those of you who have asked questions so far, we are compiling a kind of frequently asked question document that summarizes a lot of what we've heard to date, and we will be updating that tonight with some of the questions we've heard tonight and posting that online. So for some of these other questions that are a little bit outside everyone on this call's wheelhouse, such as that utility question, we will be reaching out to our colleagues across the department to make sure we get an accurate answer for you and updating the website as we have that information. Looking through the remaining questions we have, I see a lot regarding that enforcement question and the speed question. And I think at this point, we've done a pretty good job addressing those. I do have kind of two though, that I think would benefit from additional explanation, because I think we talk about 85th percentile speed a lot and how it relates to speed limit, and it can be a little complicated and confusing. So Peter, I'm going to ask you one more time to kind of explain how that works. So Sharon notes that, when we mention 85th percentile, we know she says people are driving 64 miles per hour because the speed limit is 55, but if the speed limit was decreased to 45, they would drive 54, and subsequently 35 miles per hour, they might drive 44. She's not following the 85th percentile rationale. Could you clarify that?
Sure. So the manual that Matt mentioned earlier, the MUTCD that the FHWA publishes, so it's a regulation within that regulation, it requires states or recommends states to post speed limits within 5 miles an hour of the 85th percentile speed of free-flowing motorists. So when you think about what the current condition is out there today with regards to the 85th percentile, I mentioned it's 64 miles an hour. Posting a speed limit within 5 miles an hour would be around 60 miles an hour. Our posted condition is already below that. But when we start taking into account the various other factors, the context sensitivity, the users of the roadway, the safety side of it, that's where we can start looking at reducing or proposing a reduced speed below that 85th percentile condition. When you start looking at now the differential or the difference between what the proposed condition of 45 miles an hour is to that 85th percentile, we're already it's going to be about a 20-mile-an-hour difference. However, that's where our goals with the aligning the mid and the long-term thought for the corridor is now to try to narrow those lanes, implement various other devices to help improve and bring that 85th percentile speed closer to that 45 mile an hour posting in that section that's south of the bridge.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Let's see. This one is a little bit different. Currently there are yield pedestrian signs along Route 1 in North Bethany, but cars are traveling very quickly. What happens if a car ahead stops for a pedestrian and multiple cars behind don't see the stopping? It's a pileup waiting to happen. Matt?
Don't disagree that 80 miles an hour and trying to yield to pedestrians is a problem. That's why when we do these compliance studies, there's a high percentage or half the population doesn't yield. So I don't necessarily follow the question other than, that's something that we're aware of with the RFBs. And that's why we're trying to provide as much light as we can, posting flashers and signs 400 to 500 feet in advance helps with that stopping sight distance. Posting them overhead and in the median as well tries to capture everyone's attention that there's pedestrian and bicyclist activity at that particular location and somebody wants to cross at that particular time. So we're just trying to make people generally more aware and hopefully they slow down in the process.
Thank you, Matt. I think we've addressed some of these questions about types of crossing improvements that are safe for given speed limits.
I'm going to post in Sarah's, I'll type in an answer with a link to the statewide pedestrian hybrid beacon or hawk compliance study for Sarah.
Thank you,
So
Matt.
I'll go ahead and fix that.
Yeah, and we will include links to some of these documents in that FAQ or references as well that we're developing. All right, feedback. Option 2B looks like a home run for this region. I think question about what the timeline would be, and I think we already spoke to that with Pam's feedback a few minutes ago. Question about which politician should people reach out to that could be most helpful in making this happen sooner rather than later. Definitely, given that it is the Sussex County that works with DelDOT to propose projects for the CTP, I would think your county representatives. Pam, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think just with I think maybe formalized kind of, response from maybe the coalition. I know you guys have been doing, your groups have been doing a great job with, to rally around. I think having a succinct, just based on what our short, medium, and long term improvements are, just, voicing what you guys feel like from a group would be great. I'm not exactly sure like what all, I think that's helpful in letting your local representation know. That can always be a good support, but I really can't speak for them as to what like they can do or not do from their seats. So, but I would always highly, in you guys voted for them and put them in office and like, doing your voicing your opinion. I'm sure they would love to hear what you guys have to say.
Thanks, Pam. And the second part of that question is regarding the effectiveness of guardrail, specifically steel guardrail as compared to the tension wire guardrail that we're seeing further north in the median. I don't know who wants to take this one. Peter, Matt?
So from a safety standpoint, again, there's no, the detail of the type of guardrail for this area is still like unknown. As designs get underway, that's what would be kind of reviewed and evaluated further. However, from an effectiveness, our high tension cable barrier system, has, been hit several times along the Route 1 corridor that exists today, as well as some of the others. We're expanding the implementation on Route 1 from about Trapshooters Road in Kent County all the way to Route 30 in Sussex County, because we know we're from a safety and a more of a risk factor and a proactive measure that cross median type of a crash has statistically proven to be fatal, if not have multiple fatals associated with it. So that's where, again, and we've seen even through inclement weather where some of the cable barrier systems have been implemented, various hits on the cable barrier which have prevented that cross median crash from ever occurring, which in theory then prevents that fatal or serious injury from happening. So we have had success with the system, but again, the detail of what is implemented as part of like the long-term improvements would be ironed out further into the design.
Thank you, Peter. Question about, while I have you, about House Bill 94. Would it be possible for North Bethany Beach to become a residential district and be eligible under that bill? Do you know?
So because it's has state police jurisdiction, it would not be eligible for the pursuit of electronic speed enforcement cameras.
Thank you for that very direct answer. I like it when we don't have ambiguity, even if it's not the answer we want. New legislation would be necessary to enable speed cameras on this corridor. Looking to my fellow panelists to see if there's anything in the chat that you feel we have not addressed yet, but I do feel that we are in a pretty good position. Jen notes this area is unique given that it is a high, off-season population, or excuse me, summer population and shoulder season, and asks why this area can't get a special designation as a coastal resort area similar to a school zone and have higher fines for violation of speed. Those are some great creative ideas, but at the end of the day, kind of how we can enforce speed limit is governed by state law. Peter, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so the school zone designation, the same thing with like a 2-lane road, a divided highway. They're all identified through statutory conditions in Delaware code. So adding, say, a new designation would require a change or an act of legislation for updating or improving Delaware state code.
Thank you. All right, so I think we are in relatively good shape. We do have a couple of questions kind of asking what you all can do to help. And honestly, at this point, it's just trusting the process and continuing to provide your feedback and kind of giving us some information, and you definitely are doing that. So thank you so much, because I think we are going to be setting new records on the number of survey responses we've received to the online survey, which is really great. We will be posting this Zoom recording. It's going to take us a couple days to kind of download off the cloud and get uploaded to YouTube and posted on the website, but it will be posted. And I will notify Seth. I'll shoot you an email so you can let folks know it's available, and also kind of put a little update flag on the website so folks can check that out. And also, for those who don't want to sit through this delightful viewing of an hour and what are we at now, 20 minutes of talking, we will be posting that written summary document, which is just a couple of pages long, that kind of hit the most commonly asked questions we've been hearing to date. So hopefully that'll be a valuable resource for you all as well. And we hope to have that up by the end of this week. So thanks to those of you who have stuck with us this long. If for any reason you feel you did not get a full answer to your question, again, I encourage you, please shoot us an email via that email address you see on screen, and we'll get back to you individually. And with that, I hope you all have a great dinner if you've not eaten yet, and also a safe Memorial Day weekend we have coming up here as well. And thank you very much to all of our panelists for their time and expertise this evening.